When I first arrived at the old house, I wasn't looking for comfort. I wasn't looking for anything, really. After losing her, there wasn't much left to search for. The idea of moving to a place so isolated, so far removed from the life I used to know, was all I could think of to dull the pain. The silence was supposed to help, supposed to drown out the endless noise in my head. The house was ancient, its wood creaking with every step, as though it too was carrying its own weight of years. The walls were stained with age, the floorboards groaned beneath my feet, and the wind that blew through the broken seals of the windows made the entire place feel alive, like it was breathing. But that's what I wanted, something far away from everyone, where I could disappear for a while, where no one would ask how I was doing or look at me with that same expression of pity. The first night, I sat in the living room, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked, listening to the crackling of the old fireplace. I thought the quiet would soothe me, but instead, it felt suffocating. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway was unnerving, like a countdown to something I couldn't name. At first, I blamed it all on grief. The missing items, the misplaced keys, small things I'd find in places I was sure I hadn't left them. The constant feeling that someone was watching me, just out of sight, always lurking in the corners of my vision. But I brushed it off, told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a side effect of the overwhelming emptiness that seemed to swallow everything since she was gone. The house, though, it had a way of making the silence feel like more than just the absence of sound. It felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. But I wasn't afraid. Not yet. It was late, and the wind howled through the trees surrounding the house, rattling the windows. I sat on the couch, staring at the embers in the fireplace, trying to keep my mind quiet. The glow of my phone on the table caught my eye, a notification. Strange, considering I hadn't been in contact with anyone since I moved here. I picked it up, expecting some automated message or spam. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. The words on the screen sent a shiver down my spine. I miss you. Why did you leave me? My heart pounded in my chest. I stared at the message, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. It couldn't be her. It couldn't be. But the phrasing, the tone, it was exactly how she would have spoken. The message felt like her. I wanted to believe it was some cruel prank, someone who knew too much, but I couldn't understand how. No one else knew this side of her. No one else knew the way we spoke to each other, the words we used, the things we shared. I deleted the message, telling myself it was just a sick coincidence. A glitch. Maybe my grief was playing tricks on me, reading into things that weren't there. But the messages didn't stop. Each night, a new one appeared. Why did you let me die? I'm still here, Daniel. Can't you feel me? I began checking the phone obsessively, even though I dreaded what I'd find. The messages grew more specific, mentioning things only she would know. The night of our anniversary, the fight we had before everything fell apart, the last words she spoke before she was gone. And then they started hinting at something darker. Something I hadn't considered before. You didn't see what really happened, did you? It wasn't an accident, Daniel. Someone wanted me gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't just some sick joke, and it wasn't my imagination. These messages, whoever or whatever was sending them, were pointing to something I'd never even thought to question. Her death. The way she died. Had I been so blinded by my grief that I missed the truth? Terrified but unable to stop myself, I started to dig deeper into the night she died. I went through old records, phone calls, anything that might explain why the messages felt so real, why they felt like her. What if she had been trying to tell me something all along, something I was too broken to see? I didn't know where this would lead, but I was beginning to realize that the past wasn't as dead as I had thought. The more I dug into the messages, the more I realized they weren't just about her, they were about this place. There was something off about the house, something I hadn't noticed at first. Maybe it was the way it seemed to groan at night, or the strange cold spots that appeared no matter how many fires I lit. The deeper I went into the history of this house, the more I understood that whatever was happening to me wasn't new. I started at the local library, sifting through old newspapers and town records. That's when I found it, a string of unsolved murders, all tied to this very house. The dates stretched back decades, long before I had even heard of this place. Families, couples, all found dead under mysterious circumstances. The police reports were vague, the investigations inconclusive. No suspects. No arrests. Just death after death, all fading into forgotten history. And the whispers, God, the whispers. I heard them more frequently now. At first, I thought it was the wind slipping through the cracks in the walls, but it was something else. I'd hear my name in the dead of night, soft, barely a breath, like someone was standing right behind me. I'd turn around, and of course, there was no one there. But the feeling lingered, like I wasn't alone in the room. Then I found the photographs. Dusty, tucked away in an old box in the attic. They showed previous occupants of the house, families smiling in front of the fireplace, children playing in the yard. All of them were dead now. I stared at the faces, trying to connect them to the names I'd read about in the old reports. One family in particular stood out, the Hendersons. They had lived here just a few years before me. Husband, wife, 2 kids. All of them found dead in the basement. The official cause of death was a gas leak, but the autopsies, they told a different story. Bruises, cuts, signs of a struggle. The case was quietly closed. No one cared. No one asked questions. I started to see parallels, connections between what happened to them and what was happening to me. Their deaths weren't accidents. The house, this house, had something to do with it. I became obsessed, spending days combing through old letters, scrawled notes left behind by previous owners. All of them described the same things: footsteps in empty hallways, voices that weren't there, strange messages that couldn't be explained. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. The house wanted something. It had always wanted something. And now, I was convinced it had taken her from me. The messages, the way they pointed to her death, they were leading me somewhere, guiding me to the truth. I could feel it in my bones. This place held the key to everything: the unsolved murders, the whispering in the dark, the night my wife died. I couldn't stop now. I had to know. The storm hit suddenly, the wind howling like some wild, ravenous beast outside. Thunder crashed, rattling the windows, and the rain slammed against the house in waves, as if it was trying to tear the walls down. I sat in the living room, heart racing, knowing something was coming. I could feel it. The house had been quieter than usual that day, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then my phone buzzed. I knew I shouldn't look. Every instinct told me not to, but I couldn't stop myself. I picked it up with shaking hands and saw the message: "Come to the basement." That was it. No explanation, no signature. Just those 4 words, staring back at me like an open wound. I hesitated, my mind screaming at me to leave, to run, but my body moved on its own. I was past the point of resisting. I had to know what was waiting for me down there. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I descended into the basement, each step heavier than the last. The air grew colder the farther I went, the smell of damp earth thick in my nostrils. I could hear the storm raging above, but down here, it was almost silent. The kind of silence that presses against your skull, suffocating you. As soon as I stepped off the last stair, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through me, but then a faint light flickered to life, dim and ghostly, casting long shadows across the concrete walls. And that's when I saw it. A figure stood in the center of the room, dark, formless, but somehow familiar. It didn't move, but I felt its presence, like it was watching me, waiting for me to acknowledge it. My breath caught in my throat as it slowly raised a hand, pointing at me, and suddenly, the world shifted. I was no longer in the basement. I was back in my old house on that night. Everything came rushing back in vivid detail: the sounds, the smells, the crushing sense of dread. I saw my wife, standing at the top of the stairs, her face twisted in fear and confusion. She was calling my name, her voice desperate, and I remembered running toward her, but something held me back. I couldn't move, couldn't reach her. The air around me thickened, pressing down on me like invisible hands. I watched helplessly as she fell, her body tumbling down the stairs in slow motion, her scream echoing in my ears. The sound of her bones breaking as she hit the bottom was something I'd never forget, no matter how hard I tried. I wanted to scream, to do something, but I couldn't. I was trapped, forced to relive it all over again. The figure from the basement appeared at the top of the stairs, watching me with cold, empty eyes. It wasn't just a shadow, it was someone, something from this house. The longer I looked, the more I realized it wasn't a stranger. It was a part of me. I snapped back to the basement, gasping for air. The figure was still there, silent and unmoving. But now, I understood. It was showing me the truth. The night my wife died wasn't an accident. It was the house. It had manipulated everything, twisted my memories, distorted reality until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I staggered back, my head spinning, trying to make sense of it all. The room felt alive, the walls breathing, the floor shifting beneath my feet. I was losing myself, and I didn't know if I'd ever get back. Was any of this real? Or had the house finally driven me mad? I didn't know anymore. The storm outside had reached a fever pitch, but it was nothing compared to the chaos inside me. The wind screamed, shaking the walls of the house, and the rain beat down like a relentless hammer. I couldn't think straight anymore. My mind was fractured, each thought slipping away the moment I tried to grasp it. I knew deep down that I was close to the truth, but it terrified me. I stumbled through the house, my vision blurred, the walls warping and twisting around me. The messages, the figures in the dark, the whispers, they all made sense now. They had been leading me here, to this moment. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, feeding on my pain, twisting my memories, bending my reality until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. And then it hit me. I had been part of this all along. The figure in the basement, the one who showed me that night, that was me. I had seen myself, my own shadow, replaying the night of her death. The way I stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen, watching her fall. The house had done something to me, clouded my mind, made me forget. It had manipulated me, twisted my grief into something darker. She hadn't just fallen. I made her fall. The realization tore through me, a tidal wave of guilt and horror. I had been an unwitting pawn in the house's sick game, a puppet controlled by something far older and darker than I could comprehend. It had used me to kill her, to add her to the long list of victims that stretched back through the house's cursed history. I staggered to the mirror in the hallway, my reflection barely recognizable. My face was gaunt, my eyes hollow, haunted by what I had become. The storm outside felt like a mirror to the storm within me, raging uncontrollably, tearing me apart. I saw the shadow again, standing behind me in the reflection. It smiled, a cruel, knowing smile. I had never escaped that night. I was still there, trapped in a loop, forced to relive the worst moment of my life over and over, each time believing it was the first. The house had me now, just like it had everyone else who had ever lived here. I wasn't grieving my wife, I was grieving myself. The final message came through my phone, lighting up the darkness one last time. You're mine now. The truth hit me like a hammer. I had been lost the moment I stepped into this house. There was no escape, no running from the guilt, the pain, the violence. It had all been part of the house's design, a trap that had been laid long before I arrived. The deaths, the murders, they weren't accidents. They were sacrifices, a constant cycle of suffering that fed the evil within these walls. And now, I was part of it. I sank to the floor, the weight of it all crushing me. I could feel the house tightening its grip, wrapping itself around me like a suffocating blanket. I had played my role, just like all the others before me. The cycle would continue, and I would be trapped here, a ghost in my own life, reliving the same nightmare forever. I closed my eyes as the storm raged on, knowing that this was the end. Or maybe it was just the beginning. The house had won. I stepped off the bus and took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs with a sense of trepidation. The city loomed before me, its skyline jagged against the twilight sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the cracked pavement. This was supposed to be my fresh start, a chance to leave behind the chaos of my past, but something about this place felt off. The streets were dimly lit, the flickering neon signs casting a sickly glow over the cracked sidewalks. As I walked through the winding alleys, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The buildings, tall and imposing, loomed over me like silent sentinels, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and every sound seemed amplified: distant sirens, the rustle of leaves, the echo of my own footsteps. I finally arrived at my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the third floor of an aging building. The worn door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, revealing a sparsely furnished space that smelled faintly of mildew. I set my bags down and surveyed my surroundings, trying to convince myself this would be home. But as night fell, the shadows deepened, and an unsettling sensation crept over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. A chill ran down my spine, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking just beyond the edges of the dim light. My heart raced as I moved further into the apartment, the strange sensation intensifying with each step. It felt as if someone or something was watching me from the corners, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, the product of too many sleepless nights and haunting memories. But as I lay in bed that first night, staring at the peeling ceiling, I couldn't escape the sense that I had stepped into a web of dark mysteries, one that might soon entangle me in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. A few days into my new life, I found myself scrolling through news articles online, trying to familiarize myself with the city. That's when I stumbled upon the headlines, reports of missing persons, one after another. It was shocking, but what chilled me to the bone was how many of them had disappeared without a trace. The stories were eerily similar, young people, all seemingly well-adjusted, simply vanishing from the face of the earth. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these disappearances. Curiosity gnawed at me, compelling me to dig deeper. My search led me to a common thread, a local bar named the Black Lantern. It seemed to be a hub for many of the missing individuals. Each article mentioned it, hinting at something sinister lurking behind its charismatic owner, Victor. Victor was described as charming, his smile disarming, but there was something in those descriptions that made my skin crawl. The more I read, the more I felt drawn to the bar, as if it were a magnet pulling me closer despite the warnings etched in the stories of those who'd vanished. So, against my better judgment, I decided to check it out. As I stepped through the heavy wooden door of the Black Lantern, the atmosphere hit me like a wave. The dim light cast shadows that twisted and curled around the patrons, giving the place an almost surreal quality. The air was thick with smoke and laughter, but it felt hollow, as if the joy was a facade masking something darker. The walls were lined with mismatched furniture, and the sound of clinking glasses blended with soft jazz playing in the background. I spotted Victor behind the bar, his presence magnetic. He moved with an unsettling grace, pouring drinks and exchanging playful banter with the patrons, who seemed entranced by him. I could feel the tension in the room, a strange energy that sent chills down my spine. It was as if everyone was under some kind of spell, their eyes glazed over, completely captivated by Victor's charm. I took a seat at the bar, my heart racing. The bartender approached, and I ordered a drink, trying to blend in while my mind raced with questions. Why did all these people seem so entranced? What secrets did this place hold? The sense of dread grew within me, but I couldn't pull myself away. There was a connection I needed to uncover, and I was determined to find out what had happened to those who had disappeared, no matter the cost. It was a couple of nights after my first visit to the Black Lantern that I met her, Emily. She was sitting alone at a corner table, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby lamp. Something about her drew me in, and I felt an inexplicable urge to talk to her. After a few moments of hesitation, I made my way over, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, a hint of surprise in her blue eyes, but then a warm smile spread across her face. "Sure. I could use the company," she replied, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. As we talked, I found myself captivated not only by her beauty but by her wit and the way her laughter danced through the air. She seemed to have a lightness about her that was a stark contrast to the heaviness of the bar and the dark rumors swirling around it. But as our conversation deepened, I could sense an undercurrent of unease. Emily leaned in, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "Have you heard the rumors about Victor?" she asked, her expression turning serious. "People say he's involved with the disappearances. Some think he's dangerous." My stomach twisted at the thought, and I couldn't help but feel a protective instinct rising within me. "I've heard a bit. It's unsettling, isn't it?" I replied, trying to gauge her reaction. She nodded, a shadow passing over her face. "I'm intrigued by him, to be honest. There's something about his charisma that's hard to resist. But I can't shake the feeling that there's something sinister lurking beneath the surface." I felt a chill run down my spine as her words echoed in my mind. Here was this vibrant woman, drawn to the very person I suspected was responsible for the horrors plaguing this city. "You should be careful," I warned, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's a darkness here, Emily, and I don't want you to get caught up in it." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw fear flicker across her face. "I appreciate that," she said softly, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her otherwise composed demeanor. "But I can't help but feel drawn to the mystery. There's something about this place. And Victor." That night, as we parted ways, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread that settled in my chest. I knew I had to dig deeper into the mystery, not just for the sake of the missing people, but for Emily as well. The thought of her getting too close to Victor and whatever darkness surrounded him filled me with an urgency I couldn't ignore. She had become more than just a curiosity, she was someone I needed to protect. And I would do whatever it took to keep her safe, even if it meant diving headfirst into the abyss. The more I learned about Victor, the more certain I became that he was the orchestrator of the disappearances. My mind raced with the connections I was starting to piece together, each patron, each missing person, all linked to this charismatic monster. With each passing day, the weight of the mystery pressed down harder on my chest, suffocating me. Emily had become my ally in this perilous quest. We met often at the bar, discussing our findings in hushed tones as if the shadows themselves were listening. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also determination. She wasn't just intrigued by Victor, she was ready to face him. Together, we devised a plan. We would confront him, catch him off guard, and expose his dark secrets to the world. The night of our confrontation arrived, and my heart thundered in my chest as we approached the Black Lantern. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. I felt Emily's hand slip into mine, her grip firm and reassuring. "We can do this," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with resolve. As we entered the bar, the familiar sight of Victor behind the counter sent a shiver down my spine. He greeted us with his usual charm, but this time, I noticed the way his eyes narrowed ever so slightly, as if he were assessing us. I fought the urge to recoil from his gaze, knowing we had to stay composed. We made our way to a secluded corner of the bar, our plan unfolding like a carefully scripted play. I pretended to engage Emily in conversation, while secretly scanning the room for any sign of the missing individuals. But as I looked around, I noticed something unsettling. The patrons seemed unusually enthralled by Victor, their eyes glued to him as if they were under his spell. "Jake," Emily said, her voice barely audible, "what if he knows?" Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed through the bar, drawing everyone's attention. Victor stood at the center, a confident smile plastered on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice smooth and captivating, "tonight we have a special performance lined up." My stomach twisted as I realized he was using this distraction to manipulate us. He was always one step ahead. It was all part of a twisted game to him, an audience for his sick pleasure. I exchanged a panicked glance with Emily, but it was too late. Victor's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I felt paralyzed. It was as if he could see straight through me, reading my every thought, my every fear. "You're curious, aren't you?" he said, a mocking tone lacing his words. "You want to know what happened to all those poor souls?" In that instant, the gravity of our situation crashed down on me. This was no longer a simple confrontation. We had walked into his trap, and I could feel the walls closing in. My heart raced as I realized that he was not just a killer, he was a puppeteer, playing with our minds and our lives as if they were mere toys in his sadistic game. As the patrons began to cheer, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding, I turned to Emily, the weight of our impending doom hanging heavily between us. "We need to get out of here," I urged, desperation lacing my voice. But Victor's laughter rang out, drowning my words in a cacophony of dread, as I understood we were in a fight for our lives, and the odds were stacked against us. Panic surged through me as the horrifying truth hit me. I was Victor's next target. Everything had been meticulously orchestrated, and I was just another piece in his twisted game. The bar wasn't merely a venue, it was a stage, and I was an unwitting participant in this dark performance. "Jake, we need to get out of here," Emily urged, her voice trembling with fear. But as we tried to escape, Victor stepped in front of us, a disconcerting grin on his face. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his tone smooth yet chilling. "You're the highlight of tonight's show." My heart raced as I glanced around the room. The patrons had transformed into an audience, their faces lit with a mix of excitement and anticipation. They leaned in closer, oblivious to the tension that hung thick in the air. Before I could react, Victor moved swiftly, grabbing my wrist with an iron grip. "You should feel honored. This is a unique experience, just for them," he whispered, his breath sending chills down my spine. In that moment, reality crashed down on me. I couldn't save Emily, I couldn't save myself. I was ensnared in this grim spectacle, and Victor was the one pulling the strings. As he gestured toward the crowd, I knew this wasn't just about me, it was a dark performance meant to entertain. I felt a surge of desperation, and instinct kicked in. I had to turn the tables. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I yanked my arm free and shouted for Emily to run. "Get out of here," I urged her, feeling the weight of Victor's gaze on me. The atmosphere in the bar shifted, and the patrons, now fully aware of the chaos unfolding, began to murmur in confusion. Victor's expression darkened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. As Emily dashed toward the exit, I confronted Victor, my heart pounding. "You won't get away with this," I shouted, channeling every ounce of courage I had left. In that moment of defiance, the power shifted. The audience's excitement transformed into apprehension as they realized they were witnessing something real, something terrifying. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, Victor's laughter echoed through the bar, chilling and sinister. It was clear he had planned for this. "You think you can escape," he taunted, his confidence returning. In that instant, I understood that the fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. The cycle of terror in this city was far from broken, and the darkness lurking in the shadows would continue to haunt us all. As I stood there, heart racing, I knew I had become part of a story far more complex than I ever imagined. The echoes of Victor's laughter faded into the background, but the battle for survival was just starting, and I was determined to unravel the mystery behind this chilling nightmare.